think we're at 8 o'clock. Guys, Eden, are you ready?
Yeah, it looks like we have 26 out of the 27, so majority is here.
Thank you. Raheem, are you ready to go?
Yes.
All right, just bring us to that first slide and we'll start working through this. All right, well, thank you, everybody. My name is Doug Peterson, Executive Director of Saskatchewan Soccer, and I am currently sitting in my house in Emerald Park in the dark. Our power is out. So Eden and Raheem are in Saskatoon, and they will cover as they need to during the course of this call, but just want to remind everybody of the logistics. So please raise your hand if you wish to be recognized. We ask you to keep your mute button on until you're recognized to speak. Keep it to one question at a time if you can at the start of the call, and then we'll have open questions later on. If you wish to direct your question to a specific person, please let us know that. And again, once your question is done, please remute. If you're in an unstable situation with background noise or an unstable internet connection, please ask questions via the chat function. So with that, I would welcome Lisa to bring greetings from the board and open the meeting, please.
Thanks so much, Doug. Thanks to everybody for getting on the call, and on behalf of the board of directors and staff, I want to welcome all the member organizations who have taken the time to be on the call tonight. I also want to thank the staff and the board, some of who are on the call tonight, for making this call possible. With the projected date of June 8th announced for phase 3 of the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, we continue to see the way forward and the progress our province is making. Although we don't know exactly when we'll be able to resume play, but we are optimistic that we are one step closer to getting back on the pitch. So tonight we'll look at the Return to Soccer plan draft and comments from the member survey. We'd like to have an interactive discussion, as we'd like to hear from all of you and address any questions and concerns that you may have and what our future will look like. So through that collaboration with you, we will ensure that when the time comes, we've asked all the right questions and taken all the necessary steps to prepare to get back on that pitch. So once again, thank you for joining us on these calls. And of course, we always value your feedback and are extremely grateful that you're committed to the game. So with that, I'll return it over to Doug, and he'll go over the agenda for tonight's meeting discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. So we're going to focus primarily on Return to Soccer plan tonight. We had the member survey close on May 22nd, so we'll bring some of that onto the table, and we'll have Raheem walk us through the Return to Soccer plan. And we want to spend time with you guys, get questions, comments, find out what's happening in the local area. So we appreciate your input as we get further on in this. So Raheem, you maybe go to that next slide, please. So at this point, we really want to encourage collaboration, focus, and patience. Tonight, as usual, there'll be all kinds of questions that we do not have good answers for yet. We work diligently with Canada Soccer, with SaskSport, and try to find out what's happening with from a government level, but there's still lots of questions that need to be resolved. And so, we're not in a position to answer questions that we don't have the details on yet, but we will try to keep people posted on that. Obviously, the provincial government announced phase 3 starting on June 8th, and that's presented some sense of urgency around soccer returning, which is scheduled for phase 4. We know there's no date estimate for this, and we know that public gathering sizes in phase 3 have increased from 15 to 30 or 10 to 30, whatever it was the last time I checked. So potentially in phase 4, those are larger, but at this time, we really don't know what that means specifically for soccer. The government at this point has not been ready to comment on organized sport. They have a focus primarily on individual recreational sports so far. And we'll also have to consider what approach the municipalities and facility operators will take over the next few weeks and months here. So the return to soccer plan that Raheem is presenting to you, Raheem took a major leadership role in bringing the technical staff of Canada Soccer together on this, and we also have been encouraged by the input from members on the member survey. And so we present this as draft tonight, but we're hoping that it'll be ready to go to Canada Soccer on Saskatchewan's behalf fairly soon. And I can tell you that Canada Soccer is working on final amendments to the Return to Soccer assessment tool, and that's a piece that all members will be required to complete. And we'll probably talk more about that, obviously, when we have more details than when the final version is available. So we're looking forward to seeing more on that in the days ahead, and we think that's fairly soon. So with that, my power is coming off and on, so I feel a little bit more confident about that. But I'll turn it over to Raheem, who's going to walk us through the Return to Soccer plan. And I believe Raheem is going to invite questions at the end. Feel free to use the chat function to type in questions, and Eden will try to monitor the raising of the hand and the chat function and keep us engaged in those activities. So with that, I will turn it over to Raheem to walk us through the Return to Soccer plan.
Thanks, Doug. Welcome, everyone. Excited to present some information tonight. So we'll just get right into it. So first off, thanks to all the organizations that provided information around their return to play in the member survey summary that ended on Friday. And this is just an encapsulation of some of the information that we had. So when asked the question, which activities should be the focus when returning, 64% said modified training and games, 32% said modified training only. What activity would your organization support? 60% in-club activity, 16% inter-club activity, 8% provincial competitions and festival, and 16% other. Common themes in the survey responses were everyone's safety is important, players, parents, coaches, referees, volunteers, critical to follow information and public health authority recommendations, how to determine and evaluate symptoms regarding participation, and then modifications are required and should include social distancing measures, limiting training and team size, limiting spectators, the season length, and developing equipment sanitization and safety plans. So we appreciate all the information, and I believe that you'll see some of this information that was provided dispersed throughout the upcoming breakdown of the Return to Soccer plan. So there's going to be 6 different sections that we take a look at in terms of an overview. Many of you are familiar with the review of Canada Soccer's 5-step process. So review of the current situation in Saskatchewan, and then an overview of this document, process of returning to soccer, a phased-in approach of resuming soccer, and then important considerations. So the Canada Soccer Return to Soccer guidelines came out, I believe, almost a couple weeks ago, and sort of outlined 5 steps to get back to soccer. And so what we're presenting today is going to be around step 4, which is the provincial or territorial member association Return to Soccer plan being approved. Currently, the situation in Saskatchewan, as we all know, soccer is a part of phase 4 of 5 phases in the reopening Saskatchewan plan. We're currently in phase 2, although phase 3 has been announced as a projected start date of June 8th. One of the assumptions that we could potentially make is that phase 4 would not start until after July long weekend or July 1st, just because of increase of gatherings or increasing the max number of individuals at a gathering may not be ideal around a public holiday. So I would say that from an assumption standpoint, we're sort of looking at it as early July. In terms of the overview of the SSA Return to Soccer plan, the information in this document will be submitted to Canada Soccer for their feedback. This will serve as guidelines to assist in the delivery of safe sport reintroduction for participants and member organizations. Safety comes first. So proceed with an abundance of caution and commitment to completing due diligence. It is imperative to maintain the trust of our participants to ensure we provide a safe environment for them and others. And as an important consideration, use common sense, do not make assumptions, and ask the proper authorities if you do not know, and do not feel the need to rush through some of the different phases that we outline in moving from sort of no contact to full contact, which we'll outline in a few slides, and make the right choice for your community. So in terms of the process of returning to soccer, the table below should help provide clarity on the steps needed in order to resume organized soccer programming. The outlined steps follow the assumption that soccer is an included sport, which is being given the go-ahead to resume operations from the provincial government and other key stakeholders such as municipalities and facility operators. So in terms of these steps, step 1 is SSA submits their return to soccer plan to Canada Soccer for review. Step 2 would be Canada Soccer reviews the return to soccer plan and provides commentary. If changes are necessary, then we would obviously go back to step 1 and resubmit once those adjustments are made. Step 3 would include the return to soccer plan provided to SSA member organizations, which outlines the steps and phases for resuming soccer and provides a template for developing their own return to soccer plan. Member organizations, and this would be step 4 now, must adhere to the phase of resuming soccer. Member organizations develop their own plan based on the considerations in this document and then complete the Canada Soccer Return to Soccer Assessment Tool. Step 5 would be that Canada Soccer and Saskatchewan Soccer will engage with the member organizations to provide feedback on any areas of improvement in the Return to Soccer Assessment Tool, which will help the member organization determine whether they are ready to return to play or not. If a member organization needs to resubmit, go back to step 4 until the assessment tool confirms readiness. And then step 6, member organizations are able to deliver soccer and must adhere to the phase of resumption. So in terms of the phases, we've sort of put them on a spectrum of 4 phases. Phase 1 being no contact. So social distancing measures are in place. And so the primary emphasis is going to be more technical based activities with a potential caveat that you could create opposition utilizing individuals from within the same household or family bubble. Phase 2 is minimal contact. So social distancing measures are being relaxed. And around that is, we only know what the current iteration of what social distancing measures are in place. So we have physical distancing of 2 meters. We also have max capacity. That may change over the coming weeks and months as the different, as phase 4 gets announced and begins in phase 5 for the Saskatchewan reopening or the reopening of Saskatchewan plan. So we currently don't know what those look like, but assuming that social distancing measures are being relaxed, there could be the possibility of then small group activities. Phase 3 would, yes.
So just a reminder that the provincial government's phases 1 to 5, we are using the phrase phase in 2 ways in this document. So you might want to just clarify that before you get too farther into this.
Sure. So I know we've used the word steps and phases. We could potentially also have used stages as well, but these phases 1 to 4 are once we're able to go back to resuming soccer. So once phase 4 for the Saskatchewan reopening the economy plan is in place, we've been given a green light to return to soccer because the plan has been approved by Canada Soccer and we've been approved by the provincial government to resume as well. This is where these 4 phases, so to speak, come in. Phase 3 is increased contact. So social distancing measures are relaxed further, which may mean the introduction of small game formats, 1v1 to 7v7. And that's, again, a guideline. And then phase 4, full contact. So social distancing measures are removed, all game formats. Technical-based activities are activities that do not require opposition within a 2-meter proximity, therefore allowing players and coaches to maintain social distancing. So examples could be individual ball mastery, passing and receiving on the ground between partners, relays, and other competitions and challenges that maintain social distancing. Of course, as I said, and it's highlighted in the green text, there may be caveats around how to utilize individuals from within their own household to provide opposition. This is just more of a general overarching definition of the notion of technical-based activities. Small group activities could include activities with opposition. Numbers for the activities should remain small in 1v1 to 3v3. And the intent is to try and keep players in groups together so that they work with similar players rather than constantly mixing players together. So if you were to have, let's say, 20 players at a facility and you were in groups of 5, rather than having one player interact with all of the players within that group, if that individual was an asymptomatic COVID-19 carrier, they would now have come into potential contact with all of the players in that group. So the idea of being mindful, I would say, of trying to keep players grouped together is so that, they may be, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, a part of an extended bubble family, or they may be from the same household, or it's easier to understand who's interacted with who as well, which we'll speak about a bit later. Small game formats of 1v1 to 7v7. One of the recommendations within phase 3 would be to keep this in-house initially. So instead of playing against different clubs and different communities, it's to kind of create the notion of a festival format, but obviously not with a mass number of people gathering at one facility, where teams play against many teams on the day, but rather, having the idea of mixing teams' ages together if necessary, so that you can create some type of internal competition, because each organization, for the most part, represents a community of some kind. And so keeping that inside the community initially, as we move through the stages, or move through the phases, may be a good positive step, such that we're not providing a large number of individuals that people are interacting with and potentially transmitting amongst a larger population. And then the introduction of all game formats, I think, is fairly explanatory. Each province will have their provincial government and provincial health organization provide guidelines around what will be acceptable for the resumption of their sport regarding areas such as social distancing and max capacity for facilities. That will be no different in Saskatchewan. While there's a desire to return to normalcy during COVID-19, we need to be conscientious about the safety and welfare of all participants as the primary consideration. There is an increased importance around due diligence required to keep all participants safe and prevent community transmission within the organizations delivering soccer. So we'll talk through a couple of just important considerations, and these are meant to help organizations plan as well as possible for the resumption of soccer. So one of them, if we take into consideration phase 1, are the age and stage considerations. So for example, with Active Start, you're going to have one player, but it should also be with one other parent, guardian, or sibling. Children at this age may struggle to maintain social distancing and complete technical-based activities. We cannot expect young children to be responsible for maintaining social distancing. So using a parent or sibling will aid coaches to deliver different activities, as the child will have a parent, guardian, sibling to help manage them and some of the logistics to ensure social distancing is maintained. Social distancing does not need to be maintained by people from the same household. This will help create opportunities to plan activities that include a partner or opposition. And when thinking about things like a field layout and spacing between different groups, be overly conservative when spacing out areas to maintain social distancing. The information for Active Start is very similar to the information within fundamentals. Children at this age often need interaction with someone to remain engaged. And so, again, we can expect them to maintain social distancing. Can we utilize individuals from their household to assist the coaches in doing so? And this will hopefully create a more fulfilling and richer learning environment for them, and being overly conservative when spacing out areas to maintain social distancing. For athletes at the learn to train stage, we will be able to do different activities than Active Start and fundamentals, but athletes at this stage, at this age, need monitoring, but may be ready to maintain social distancing as directed. The level of support needed may be based on the maturity of the athletes. Engaging athletes on their strengths and weaknesses within different activities is a strategy that coaches can utilize to differentiate or individualize tasks. Individualized consideration will help keep the players engaged and focused. So if you have, for example, a strong player and that's capable of doing the prescribed activity and one that struggles, if the player that is capable of doing the activity has to wait until the player that is not able to do the activity learns, it may be 10, 15, 20 minutes. So individual tasking is sort of what we're saying, where there's the individualized consideration may allow for all the individuals in that environment to have their needs met as best as possible. And again, be conservative when spacing out the areas to maintain social distancing. Athletes at the Soccer for Life stage should be engaged in the progression of activities within training sessions during phase 1. Players should understand what social distancing is and be able to respect the social distancing requirements in place within your province while at soccer. And I think that our Soccer for Life and adult athletes in Saskatchewan would be able to, or should be able to understand the social distancing requirements in place. Engaging athletes on their strengths and weaknesses within different activities is a strategy that coaches can utilize to differentiate or individualize tasks, and the individualized consideration can be extended to athletes in these groups as well. And be conservative when spacing areas out to maintain social distancing. Oftentimes we can draw things out in our mind, but the spacing in between areas of participation may also need to change depending on the type of activity that's being done. And so it's just to be conscientious and cautious when structuring your field layouts. So some general considerations. Consider grouping in non-traditional ways. This could include stage of participation, geography, so having players from the same street, the extended bubble families, and potentially boys and girls together. Consider allowing parents to sign up for a specific time slot on a given day. This may alleviate parents driving to the field multiple times in a week, as they can sign their children up for 1 or 2 time slots during the week. This may also potentially reduce traffic congestion at the facility. So rather than a parent coming to a facility 4 times during the week for 2 children practicing twice a week, they may only come twice for both children. Consider grouping players that are part of their extended bubble families or same household together, even if that means that siblings are in the same group. This may assist families in carpooling and reducing traffic congestion at the facility, as well as the number of spectators at the field. This may also allow, especially if they're a part of extended bubble families or their siblings, is that they can provide opposition within certain activities. In the short term, the notion of team may change to allow for programming that reduces impact on families and tries to maintain a safe environment for participation. Try and keep groups together. For example, 24 participants in 1 time slot on the field, split into smaller groups of 8. Try and keep those groups of 8 together. If a child becomes a COVID-19 carrier, then their interactions with others may be limited to a small group. And when games resume, consider playing games within your organization for a duration of time to reduce the risk of interacting with other communities and organizations, which may help prevention of interacting with a larger number of individuals from other communities. Again, be cautious and conscientious and send a consistent message that gives parents and participants confidence that their safety has been the highest priority. Do not rush to restart if you do not have everything in place. So some organizational considerations. Work with coaches to ensure safe sport roster and the rule of 2 is met, and 1 coach is of the same gender as the athletes. Organizations should determine protocols for administering first aid. So it's a consideration that came to the forefront recently when we were talking about logistics on how we can organize groups. And one of the things may be if you're allowing spectators, then the parent may be the individual that is requested to come and administer their child first aid. Hand washing and sanitization stations on site. Provide coaches with the necessary sanitization equipment. Develop a communications emergency action plan for working with public health, which requires establishing a contact and for the public health groups and members to notify in case of a positive test, obviously respecting privacy concerns, and the actions that need to happen if a person within the organization contracts COVID. This would include being prepared to shut down operations quickly and efficiently. If there's a positive COVID case within one of our organizations, ensuring in support to assist in contact tracing to support the local authorities. This is where steps taken to keep consistent groups may assist greatly. In terms of moving through the phases and organizational considerations when moving through those phases, a recommendation of 4 weeks between the return to soccer phases to monitor any possible COVID transmission within practice groups. Contact health authorities if an athlete, coach, referee has contracted COVID and support them in contact tracing. So, for example, in phase 1 where there's no contact, if the social distancing requirements are being relaxed, and that's 2 weeks after we have started phase 1 of no contact, consider going for another 2 weeks in phase 1. It takes approximately 2 weeks for COVID symptoms to show. And as a result of that, we won't know if there has been a transmission, and moving to slightly larger groups or more physical contact or less social distancing requirements, which have now been relaxed, may actually increase the amount of transmission within an organization. To accommodate return to play games for older youth athletes, practice is starting approximately 2 to 4 weeks before games start to allow for the athlete's body to adapt. This is, of course, more of a concern for older athletes if there is a jump to phase 3. Consider shortening the length of matches and reduction of number of players assigned to teams. So if there is games in phase 3 and it is 7v7, instead of having very large rosters where you have got a large number of individuals sitting often on the bench, consider trying to find strategies and ways to reduce the number of players assigned to teams. Move game sheets online so there's no transfer of paper, and consider setting up policies and procedures to pay officials online versus cash payments or check payments. Facilities and scheduling. Reduce the overlap of practices and games by adding in a buffer time allocation of 10 to 15 minutes between practices. Develop, and a part of that's developing protocols for if one practice ends, everyone on the field has about 5 to 10 minutes to get to their vehicles before everyone for the next practice leaves and moves to the field in order to play. So developing protocols if needed around how locker rooms and washroom facilities are managed, cleaned, and max capacity is determined. Otherwise, adhere to the stated facility restrictions. So we do have private facilities that may have their own protocols. We may also have public facilities where parks and recreations may provide those restrictions. Make sure that information is provided to all coaches and parents about each facility, entrance, exits, reducing the bottlenecks, as well as screening and cleaning protocols and pickup, drop-off, and spectator protocols. Developing protocols for lightning. So we're used to the phrase, when thunder roars, go indoors. However, if we are at a facility where there's an outdoor field and an indoor venue of some kind, if thunder roars and everyone goes indoors, we may be actually breaking the max capacity restrictions in place and bringing a large number of individuals who may all be breathing heavily and sweating into a very close proximity with one another. So developing protocols around counseling practices where the forecasts may call for thunder and lightning on a given day. In terms of coaching considerations, priorities for coaches to ensure a safe environment for the athletes, along with adherence to the completion of coaching certifications and the Safe Sport roster. Pre-activity orientation provided to the athletes regarding safety around hand washing, cough suppression, no spitting or snot rockets. Coaches will wipe down equipment, will wipe equipment down using disinfectant swabs or towels before and immediately after each session. The recommendation is do not go home and then do not clean the equipment, because contaminated items may travel from the facility into the coach's home environment. We also recommend that only coaches and staff should handle the equipment. Bibs should be washed after each session and not shared between players during a session if used. However, we highly recommend against using bibs for phase 1 and 2. The recommendation we would provide is to bring 2 color shirts to a practice, light and dark. It may also be important for that coach to provide a little bit of insight ahead of time to group the players so that they're not having to change at the field if they are somewhat self-conscious. And then, of course, wear face masks where possible. We're all aware of the prevention measures that face masks bring. In terms of activity considerations, structure activities to maximize physical distancing, especially in phase 1. Age-appropriate considerations need to be taken when designing activities. We've spoken a little bit about the age and stage considerations. Design activities so athletes may stay within their existing small groups within phase 2 to reduce the amount of contact with different people. No heading or hand contact with the ball, feet only in phases 1 to 3, and regular sanitization breaks combined with water where possible. In terms of referee considerations, referees don't necessarily need to be involved in phase 1 and phase 2 until we get to structured games of some kind in phase 3. However, education for referees can still happen in phase 1 and 2. Referees should come dressed to the games, so there are no need for changing rooms. Potentially consider reducing the number of match officials needed for completion of a match. This may be impacted by the maximum facility capacity because we may be trying to fit a certain number of individuals onto the field. Referees should not share any gear. So things like watches, flags, and cards Work with organizations to support online game sheets and online payments to reduce the passing of paper and cash. Work with the organization or your organization regarding lightning policy implementation, as building capacity may be limited in phase 3 and 4 if players are expected to head indoors. And when assigning, consider reducing the number of referees coming and going from the fields by having referees do back-to-back games where applicable and with consideration to the health of a referee. Some potential laws of the game modifications now that we are dealing with this global pandemic. So when we return to games, it may be that yellow and red cards are given to athletes from a safe distance. Masks reside within safe apparel. Consider how a mask check would occur and what types of masks are acceptable. I have seen something on social media recently where someone thought that it was perfectly okay to use a motorcycle helmet as a mask. However, for the purposes of soccer, a motorcycle helmet would not be okay to be used as a mask. Pass or dribble in where applicable to reduce contact by multiple individuals' hands on the ball within a game. No throw-ins initially. Altercations, apologies for the spelling error, but physical altercations are an immediate dismissal from the match. Referees should stay away and allow the situation to dissolve before engaging from a safe distance. Referee education and mentorship considerations. So assessments and mentorship need to respect social distancing guidelines, and those mentors and assessors should do so from the spectator side of the pitch to reduce the number of individuals that are on the team side of the pitch. Recommendation of video assessments. We can mic up the referee and overlay the audio and video. And then instead of doing a debrief immediately in person after the game, set up a video chat instead. In terms of parent considerations, it is imperative that the parents ensure the child is healthy and no sign of symptoms. Drop and pick up the player while maintaining desired rules and regulations around pickup and drop off and being a spectator if allowed. Do not carpool unless other athletes are a part of your extended bubble family. And please, and this would be the most important thing for parents, is make sure your child has all the items they need to participate. So in terms of player considerations, athletes should come to the field dressed to play, and the recommendation is a large Ziploc bag clearly labeled with items like hand sanitizer or sanitizer wipes, cotton masks if required for participation by your organization in case one gets soiled, dirty, or compromised. Labeled water bottles where the mouth spout is covered by a lid and not open to the air. Snacks for the player, and parents would be packing this, so snacks for their child, and tissues for any allergies or to blow nose because it is summer and allergies do happen. If locker rooms are shared, they must be clean and disinfected between groups and must adhere to physical distancing. Therefore, athletes may need to take turns. And this would be dependent on local authorities and their regulations around facility usage. Athletes should bring their own soccer balls where possible, and clubs could potentially loan balls to players if they do not have one for financial reasons. It is the athlete's responsibility then to bring equipment to the field in order to participate, and equipment such as soccer balls should be sanitized at the field. Make sure to pack 2 shirts, one light, one dark, to reduce the need for pennies. Coaches could specify which shirt they would like the athlete to wear to prevent them from having to change in public at the fields, which may be concerning, especially for young girls. But that being said, it could also be concerning for young boys.
Raheem, let's hold it on that slide then.
Sure.
I think that we'll walk back through the presentation and invite questions from any of the members on the line on the more technical aspects of the return to play plan, return to soccer plan. Dive into some of the other slides if we wish, and invite questions from any at this point, and then we'll go into some other considerations after we've gone through some of these questions. So for anybody out there, if you have any questions about any aspect of the plan, or if you'd like Raheem to go back to any of the slides and review them, we'll start doing some of that at this point.
And just
Doug,
to
if you could remind individuals to use the raise hand function as well.
Yes, please. Thank you, Eden. So again, use the raise hand and you'll be recognized and give an opportunity to speak. And then we will go through the questions like that. So. So, Mike Gramiak.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, of course, the guidelines are quite extensive. I'm curious what resources are being provided to all the member organizations in terms of templates to support them in these processes. Because I think that would be one of the biggest areas that the SSA would definitely be able to support everyone is by developing these templates for the member organizations to use, be it the templates for tracking. I think it was like if someone contracts COVID, what the communication plan is. So I'm curious as to what kind of templates are in place and what's the plan to get them out to the members.
So those are things we're actually talking to other provinces about, Mike. Thank you for that question. It's actually mentioned in one of the later slides. So we're working with other provinces also to share best practices and also working with SaskSport as well. And we're also looking for supportive membership if you have developed anything to share this way as well. And then we'll share those resources and post them throughout. And what we want, of course, to do is have your assistance to help identify what those types of needs are. And please direct those questions to us. And we will work on those pieces as we can and share as we move through this. So that's some of the comments that certainly we talked about with the EDs this morning. And I'm sure Raheem has had similar calls with the provincial TDs as well. So any comments other than that from you, Raheem?
Yeah, from more of a technical perspective, there is conversations around if we're able to provide additional technical considerations or guidelines or resources. But right now, a majority of the provinces are all working on their return to play plans first to get to Canada Soccer before we're able to turn our attention to other things. So that's sort of an update from our PTD calls, Doug.
Yeah, thank you. Hugh Morris, go ahead. Hugh,
You're muted,
Just
Hugh.
muted there.
You're muted, Hugh.
Here I am. From my board,
There you
Doug,
go.
yeah, from my board, Doug, there's a question that I'm sure is on a lot of our minds, and that is, I take it that when this is a go, SSA do assume all responsibilities legally in this state, right? Am I fair to assume that and take it back to my board? Or what is the answer on that? There are concerns over the legalities and the coverage of insurances on this point, boss.
No, so that's certain. That's a slide we have to talk about for sure, Hugh. We have it lit up down below here. So
Yeah.
if you want to get into, let's jump down a couple slides then, Raheem, to that next slide. And we'll start to deal with some of these questions.
Thank you.
Raheem, can you go to slide 25, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Back up one slide. I apologize. So again, as Mike's question, we have that listed there. So one of the other things we're going to have to talk about is COVID transmission protocols. So these are some of the concerns that we'll build resources around along with Canada Soccer. And again, we invite your support and we will need your support to build those protocols. We also have to think about second wave protocols, and we'll obviously be really guided by provincial health authorities. And then Hugh has asked the questions about risk management. And so those are some of the questions we can work through. So jump down to that next slide then, Raheem. Thank you on insurance. So as you've just been notified as of Friday, and this was interesting to us, we had confirmed with Knight Archer earlier that we were good to go on COVID-19 insurance, but we've now been advised recently that no insurance is in place for COVID, and that applies really to all accident liability complaint claims, and it's also true for all businesses and nonprofits. It's not anything unique to sport. So we are frustrated that information came to us late. We still actually don't have a written explanation from the insurance broker or insurance company itself, and we're trying to work with our broker to make sure we get proper information on that. So that's frustrating, but that's the case across the board with all the SAS sports. and in Saskatchewan and also across Canada for the most part, everybody is without COVID-19 insurance. So this comes to the question of accountability, and ultimately the decision about return to play is up to each local member organization, and that decision is entirely theirs to make. And they have to determine the risks and the processes for dealing with that. And of course, that can only occur once the suspension is lifted and all steps outlined within this return to soccer plan are completed. The return to play plan is ultimately going to be decided by each of your local boards, and that decision lies with them. This process is in place right across Canada. Neither the federal government, the provincial government, Canada Soccer, SAS Sport, or Saskatchewan Soccer are going to formally approve return to play. What all of those governing organizations do is provide the guidelines, and it's up to each member organization based on the complexities of the local organization to determine if they have the readiness to proceed. Obviously, we're currently working with Canada Soccer and SAS Sport on waivers and assumptions of risk, and in fact, there's a insurance-focused meeting with SAS Sport tomorrow, which we hope will be informative. And processes are being developed within RAMP to make sure that we get those waivers in place prior to on-field return to play. So all the member organizations must ensure everybody, players, team, personnel, organizers, volunteer parents even that will be supporting your delivery, have properly registered and understand and assume those risks for returning to soccer in a COVID-19 related world. So return to on-field activity will not occur until all those waivers are finalized and in place. So we had a meeting last week with our legal counsel, with our risk management committee, and with the insurance providers, and they received this presentation, and we talked about these issues. And the advice of the insurer and the legal counsel was that obviously our standard that each organization is expected to meet is this reasonable person test, and each member organization is going to have to satisfy itself, and obviously the directors have to be confident that they have done what they can to limit exposure. But we are in a pandemic environment that we've really never experienced before, and certainly the insurance companies and the governments have indicated that nobody will be approving plans. So early on, it appeared that governments would be approving plans and that we would have to be submitting plans to governments for approval, and that has changed dramatically in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And we saw that right across Canada, with various provinces getting to that information sooner than others, and that's carried on here. So, Hugh, in regard to your question, no, the SSA will not be assuming that liability. That responsibility lies with the member organizations and your decision on whether you're ready to return to play under COVID.
Thank you, Doug. That's very, very comprehensive, and I do appreciate your answer on that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not the answer we want to provide, but that is the reality of it. And we'll invite other questions. Hugh Dooley.
On that issue, on that issue, I think it's still important everybody understands that though people are signing those waivers of risk, that they still won't protect you if they can demonstrate negligence.
Yes, thank you, Hugh. That's
you have to make sure
clearly. You go ahead, Hugh, and then I'll finish commenting. Sorry.
No, it's just very important that everybody has those processes fully in place and can demonstrate that they did them.
All of the member organizations, your boards and your volunteers, your coaches, have to really be confident that you're ready. We're heading into a time we've never contemplated really as it relates to sport. And I'm sure people are following articles in newspapers and et cetera that are raising concerns about the future of sport. All we can do is tell you that what we need to do is meet the reasonable test. So the work that Canada Soccer and Saskatchewan Soccer has done to create a return to soccer plan, and that each of you will do to create your own unique return to soccer plan, demonstrates to the powers that be that we take this seriously. But once we've put those pieces in place, we then have to execute, right? And we have to consistently execute to a very high standard. So, for example, if a coach has got a practice scheduled and he's got X number of athletes involved and he needs X number of team personnel or volunteers to support him, if those volunteers don't show up at that practice, then it's very likely that those standards can't be maintained and that practice has to be canceled. And we'd love to hear from you folks. What are your thoughts and considerations about those kinds of things as we start to get into this very complex conversation about returning to soccer? Any other comments? Hugh, your hand is still up. Do you have another question? Hugh
No,
Morris?
I'm sorry. No, I'm all good, buddy. I'm all good.
Okay, thanks. Just take that hand down.
I'll take my hand down, lower my hand. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thoughts from
Doug,
membership?
I have
Yeah,
I have a question in the chat box here. Mike Ramiak was just following up with if we have when will a decision regarding cancellation of PSL be announced?
Raheem, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would say right now, with while social distancing measures are in place, such as physical distancing of 2 meters, there will not be any games of any kind. And so if that continues into phase 4 and then potentially phase 5, the likelihood of a PSL is limited. And I would say the likelihood is not very likely because we cannot have games while social distancing measures are in place.
So on the executive director's call today with Canada Soccer, a similar question, Mike was asked about national competitions, and the response back was they wanted to get a sense from the province about who would be ready to play if there was, which Canada Soccer wants to know which provinces will be offering championships that could lead to national championships. And we would probably be asking membership a similar question of which member organizations would still consider participating in provincial championships, PSL, and eventually national championship if that opportunity was there. But right now, as Raheem said, until physical distancing is removed in phase 5 plus, whatever that might be called, there's no games to be played. So at this time, Canada Soccer hasn't made a decision on national championship, and we're going to try to follow their lead. And at some point, of course, if we know more, we will communicate that option is probably canceled. Other questions?
Sorry, just to follow up to that here, Doug. Just when I'm looking at the minimum amount of time between phases, and if that's phase 5, I mean, that's 10 weeks, or correction, that's 8 weeks before you can even get to that. So if we're starting up in July 1st at the earliest, that's not until September, or correction, that's not until September that we're back to playing games. So, I mean, just based on the information that we're getting, if that's the direction SSA is going, I don't understand how we could go ahead if there's that long between phases.
I think we're saying the same
Doug,
thing.
I'll take that question. So a part of it is we don't know what future social distancing measures will look like or when they may be removed. And so I think, Doug, you were about to say we're sort of saying the same thing. Based on the information we have right now, based on the notion that social distancing isn't going anywhere, the likelihood of games is very limited. And I think part of it is the rest of the country, and from a Canada Soccer perspective, there are other provinces that are all moving at different speeds. So some provinces may be able to introduce games and may not have physical distancing requirements or social distancing requirements in place in a month's time from now, or 2 months' time from now. And so I think it's trying to understand where everybody is across the country to see if there is a possibility. However, I think that Saskatchewan has been fairly conservative in our overall approach, but it's proving to be a successful one as much as possible. And based on that, the likelihood would be slim.
I would agree. Hugh Dooley has his hand up. Go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah, just a question on that. So your phases are basically built around the phases of the province. So if the province at the end of July stated that, let's say they've gone through the phases here, they get to the end of July and they eliminate social distancing, then that would speed up the timelines within your phases, correct, Raheen? Like that you would just
Yes.
we could go from phase 2. We legitimately can go from phase 2 to phase 4 in your plan, depending on what the provincial body does, government.
Yes, and so a part of it, and this part of this document was built for all of the Canadian PTSOs, and so everyone's going to be resuming at a slightly different point. You know, we would obviously recommend to be cautious and conscientious, traversing the different phases and providing that that bit of leeway in between each one. But if, for example, you know, by the grace of God, COVID goes away in 2 months' time, and all the measures are completely removed, yes, we could very easily potentially have that jump.
So the other piece we don't want to get ahead of, guys, and we don't know what that looks like. And at this point, I'm not sure how it helps us. Everybody, I think, understands that the games are very unlikely. By not canceling at this point, we leave some little bit of hope, and although maybe it's pretty distant. But for example, if we cancel PSL at this point and then CSA said they were going ahead with national competitions, which they've told us they're not going to decide till June 30th, then are we in a better position to react or not react? So I think we're going to probably be sending a survey back to you folks shortly, as requested by Canada Soccer this morning, to get some more information to inform that discussion and bring it up on we'll continue to talk about it on subsequent calls. But as Raheem has stated, it's highly unlikely at this point that we imagine PSL provincial championships or national championships at this point. So again, one of the things we definitely want to hear from you folks about what your questions, your concerns are, your issues. We want to work together to identify the resources you think are necessary, and we'll ask for support in your help in developing those things, as we are with our counterparts within sport and in the province and with our partners across Canada. What other questions do you have about local realities? How many member organizations are anticipating return to play in the phased-in approach we're talking about? These are some of the questions we'd like to hear more from you folks. One of the questions I have is has any of the facility operators or municipalities come out and said anything new or interesting since the Premier announced phase 3 here just a week or so ago? Any changes? For example, City of Saskatoon has closed their stuff till June 30th. Is there any change in that atmosphere anywhere that anybody can report? All right. Other thoughts, comments, questions, anything from the floor at this point?
Doug, I have just something in the chat here. Amanda messaged that there is no changes in Saskatoon. Okay, thank you. So Saskatoon, again, nothing on field for sure until June 30th. So those are things, and there was some commentary today. Amanda was on a call. Stephen and Eden were on a call today about with the facility operators. We'll provide some comments to membership in our Friday communication. So again, I'll give you a moment to think about other questions, but maybe we'll drop down another slide, Eden, and we'll go through some of the slides about the upcoming online
opportunities. Raheem, do you
Sure.
want to talk through any of those, or a lot of the technical related matters?
Just briefly, there's a webinar tomorrow evening, developing an annual plan. It's a webinar that we've run we've run this workshop previously at the 2019 AGM in Regina. I think we all met at Mosaic, but it's just to re-go through it and provide some information because not everyone was able to participate. June 4th, Dave Nutt is back and presenting to Saskatchewan organizations as a follow-on from his first presentation about the Canada Soccer Club Licensing Principles in Action. This next webinar will be around balancing quality with accessibility inclusion. And I think it will certainly be can't miss because the information on the first one was excellent. And I think any organizations interested in the club licensing program should definitely come on. And then we've also partnered with the Sports Medicine Science Council for Saskatchewan to bring a series of coaching education webinars to support both coaches and athletes in maintaining their own health and wellness. So there are 6 workshops that have been planned pretty much every Wednesday with the exception of July 1st, starting at the first week of June.
Thanks, Raheem. With that, it's 4 minutes to 9. If there's no other questions or comments, we just want to thank everyone. We'll go to the last slide. Eden. The next meeting will be June 9th. Information will be sent out every Friday again in the communication. We'll probably consider sending out a survey about provincial PSL and those types of things to support Canada Soccer's request for that type of information. Those are things we're working on, and we'll continue to work on other resources. But our primary focus right now is getting the steps ready. So Raheem, actually, I'll just run through and you just correct me if I miss any steps. Our primary focus will be submitting the return to soccer plan to Canada Soccer. We hope we get approval for that. And then we will share that with you. And then at the same time, we'll know more about the risk assessment tool. And that'll be a focus, again, of further conversation once we get information from Canada Soccer. And then we will, as Mike Gramiak has suggested, we'll work together and collaboratively with all the folks that are interested to develop and identify the resources we need. With that, if there's no other questions, I want to thank everyone for their participation. Hugh Dooley, thank you. You've raised your hand. Go ahead.
Just following up on what Mike had said, Raheem, if Canada Soccer is making a decision by June 30th in regards to national championships, is that when we can assume then a decision will be made in regards to PSL?
From us?
Yeah.
So again,
yeah, I think so. Any comment, Raheem? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from a Canada Soccer perspective, the June 30th is when they have their meeting to make their decision. If we, for example, had all social distancing, physical distancing requirements removed July 1st, although Canada Soccer has made their decision for the competition on behalf of sort of all the PSOs, we would still potentially, if there was interest, look at running a PSL or look at running provincial festivals or competitions. But the likelihood of social distancing measures being removed at that time is probably slim. And the likelihood of a large number of provinces being in a position to participate in a club nationals or have their own competitions leading to a club nationals, or even the mass gathering that could be club nationals, may not go ahead as well. So I think we'll get a lot more clarity June 30th from where things are standing within Canada. And I would say that just based on the social and physical distancing requirements within Saskatchewan, that having provincial competitions and PSL would be slim.
You have anything else on that, Hugh?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right. Last chance for any questions, comments, folks?
Doug, I have another question from the chat box.
Okay, great.
From Mike Gramiak, what would the SSA registration cost look like for organizations returning in July?
Again, Mike, in our communication on Friday, we've said we'll comment on that shortly. The board meets next week, and I expect on our next call we'll be able to clarify what that looks like. We have to also get some information from you folks because we need to understand what the demand will be on services before we can make that type of decision. So we'll ask probably turn that survey around pretty quick and find out what members are planning to do. Within a similar circumstances, we will be asking the members what their plans if we're able to return as of July 1. So we'll need to work on that collaboratively, and the board has made a commitment to try to get that information out to you as quickly as we can, but there's things we would like to know about before we make that decision as well. All right, I believe we've come to the end of questions and answers, unless there's others from the floor. I want to thank everybody. Appreciate all that you're doing. We want to continue to work together out there. This is a very strange time for us as well, and for all of you, and we're grateful for everything you're doing to make the potential for soccer stay with us, and we look forward to having continued conversations in the weeks ahead here. So thank you, everybody, and with that, we will adjourn.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Lisa.
See you, Huey.